All right, welcome everybody to Legal Tech Week for May 7th, 2021. This is the weekly program, or sometimes weekly program, occasional program, where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. And we didn't meet last week, so we've got plenty of ground to cover if we want to cover it all. We've got most of our usual panel here today. Victor Lee and Molly McDonough are not going to be able to be with us, but the rest of us are all here. I am Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog Law Sites and also have the podcast Law Next. And let's see, you want to all introduce yourself? Nikki, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I am Nikki Black, the legal technology evangelist with MyCase Law Practice Management Software. I am also a legal tech journalist. I write columns for the ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and the MyCase blog. And I will actually, I'm acting like I'm in stand-up. I was going to hand it off to someone because we do that in stand-up with my company. I'll hand it back to Bob.
You can pass it off. Go ahead. You hand it off to whoever. Let's see who you'd hand it off to. Who's your favorite?
I totally slipped into like.
Who's your favorite panelist?
Mode.
This is where we get to find out.
I'm just going to go to the right of me, which is Steve. Steven. Okay. Is it Steve or Steven? I always call you Steve, and I don't think that's right.
It's Steve. No, it is Steve. Oh, it could be either, but it's okay. Steve is fine.
Glad the two of you could meet, get to know each other.
Not used to going second. Jeez. I'm Steve Embry. I publish the blog Tech Law Crossroads about legal innovation and legal technology. Before that, I practiced law in big law for about 40 years. I'm also vice chair and soon to be chair-elect of the ABA Law Practice Division, which I'm happy to say has, at this point, over 21,000 members. So I guess I will hand it off to Joe.
Hey everybody. I am Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I am in a different room than usual because I am on a different coast than usual. I am in the Pacific time zone where it is noon, and so happy hour has become, well, gin. I feel as though like I can't turn to bourbon until it's a lot later than noon.
And how did you get there? Did you actually fly? Did you actually take one of those things that fly in the air?
So I could have, but I did not. I actually drove, it was kind of an adventure trek. I've done it before, but I wanted to be able to show folks around like the Rocky Mountains and stuff. And so I took a trip and took pictures along the way. It was an adventure. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Who do you want to hand it off to?
Oh, right. We're doing the handing off. I will hand it off to Victoria then.
Hey everyone, my name is Victoria Hudgens. I'm a reporter based out of Philadelphia, where I cover legal tech and cybersecurity, and primarily just how lawyers use technology in their profession. You'll find my byline on Legal Tech News and also other ALM sibling publications such as Law.com, American Lawyer, Corporate Counsel. And who I'm going to pass the baton to next is the person that's below me in the Brady Bunch box. So Caroline, you're next.
Yay!
I thought you were going to give it to your editor. He's your
yeah,
boss.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks.
Well, I just lost brownie points. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much. Joe, I have to say you're looking more rested. Like you're looking relaxed. Yeah. Caroline Hill, editor-in-chief, Legal IT Insider, URL legaltechnology.com. Based in the UK, global coverage. I will say that, and Bob goes, I don't know where my coverage is. And recovering litigator.
Yeah, driving 15 hours a day will make you look rested. I don't know how I can possibly look rested, but okay.
You do. You look young. You look like super young.
Maybe it's dazed.
Zach. Oh, I'm Zach.
So hey everybody, I'm Zach Warren. I'm editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News with ALM, though over the past 24 hours, I've been the editor of We Are Having Technical Difficulties, which is not great. But otherwise, we cover everything in the gamut in terms of how lawyers interact with technology. And yeah, you'll also find me on law.com and other ALM brands.
Yeah, so what has been going on with Law.com? I've been trying all day to read the stories that we were going to talk about for this piece, and I can't get through.
It's a great question. Ask our outside server providers.
Oh, sure. Blame them.
So actually, I did not know this. I want to jump in here. So our website's also crashing like crazy and it won't let you embed things. And like, if you do, it breaks down things. So I'm interested in who's attacking legal publications everywhere.
Well, as you
seems
know,
too
our
coincidental.
website regularly just doesn't work. So I'm not really like,
There's that.
Somebody's staging a DDoS attack on the legal tech bloggers of the world. That's great.
Yeah.
I can guess there's an association that might be behind that.
Yeah. It actually might be whoever's been, well, actually, I've been getting like, everybody's been like going after me on Twitter. They're not going after me on Twitter, but over the whole Bradley Gayton thing, like somehow I'm caught up in this whole like angry people on Twitter about Bradley Gayton because I had him on my podcast recently. Apparently he's stirred a lot of anger with a lot of people, and it's all coming out on Twitter. But anyway.
I have all sorts of anonymous people that love me, but it isn't really me. There's some woman who has Nikki Black in France is doing really well in The Voice. And so every day my feed is full of people saying fabulous singing, except in French. I'm assuming that's what they're saying. But so it's just like the opposite problem, but it's not really me that they want to hear. So.
Yeah. Well, let's get to it. I mean, I kind of feel like we should start off with Clio. It's been a couple of weeks now since that happened, a week and a half or so, but we didn't meet last week. And, one of the, the big news was that Clio not only had another financing round of $110 million, but that it came at a valuation of $1.6 billion, making Clio the first law practice management company to achieve so-called unicorn status, which is a startup valued at $1 billion or more. And it's probably a very strong reflection of where we are right now in this post-COVID world of the strength, everything we've been talking about here for a while, but the sudden strength of the cloud, the sudden strength of practice management applications of this kind, the importance of them for running lawyers' practices. I suspect Clio probably didn't even need the money really. It's really interesting that they did this. But I think it reflects bigger things about where we are with legal technology. There is this whole interesting trend. I hear this a lot now. It was not long ago on my podcast, I had interviewed somebody who talked about their recent raise after having been in business for like 30 years and never having had to raise a dime because they were profitable and they bootstrapped the company. And kind of made the comment about how, well, you just kind of have to raise money these days just to be cool and get attention. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But I was just talking today to a CEO of a company that's been in business in legal tech for a number of years who has never raised a dime and feels like he gets ignored, not ignored, but that he doesn't get the kind of media attention that he feels like the way to get the attention of the media these days is to raise money. And that if you don't raise money, then you're just kind of, overlooked. So I don't know. What do people think about Clio? What do people think about that general issue of, do we only cover the ones that make headlines by raising a lot of money?
That's got to be the craziest reason to raise money, right? Like,
well, no, that's not a reason to raise money.
As much as we like to blow our own trumpets, that's I think, it speaks volumes. So I did an interview with a company in the UK, which is also a unicorn called Access Group, but they are not the difference. Obviously, they've just created their own legal division. But that's just one division, right? So that they're a unicorn, but it's impressive that Clio is just I think it's fair to say that the first dedicated legal vendor to reach unicorn status. Is that right? Do we think I don't think there's any others.
Well, if you're looking at Discovery in particular, there's
Oh,
some.
yeah.
I don't think Relativity gave the actual figure publicly, but Wall Street Journal had a source that said that they were over $1 billion.
Okay, that would make
And I
sense.
think some others as well. And then there's been some contract companies like Ironclad got 100 million, which probably puts them somewhere in that general range. But that's a contract company, and I'm not sure you could call that like specifically legal. So for some, definitely for the category that Clio is in, I definitely think that's correct, though, that they're the first one that is over $1 billion, which is kind of crazy.
Well, they said they were the first one in the practice management space. They didn't even say they were the first one in legal, period. But I mean, yeah, if you, some of the e-discovery companies, Relativity's got to be up there. Ironclad did get a valuation of $1 billion plus with its last raise. Trying to think of who, I mean, there's got
And
to be.
Rocket Lawyer last month. Rocket Lawyer last month, they raised like 9 figures.
Right.
So they have a evaluation over $1 billion or just at $1 billion as well.
Right.
So it's the practice. It's the practice management specifically, right? Which it doesn't take away from it. It was just interesting.
Yeah.
And I do think like it does kind of help like for us as journalists when we maybe see that press release that says, hey, we raised $50 million for our legal tech company. Who's not really going to cover that? Like that is kind of like a quick coverage, but I think kind of like the people that you see kind of like reaching out to you and saying like what they're seeing in the market, like I think that's still how you can get coverage and just at least become like that source. And when you have stories, when you need to know like what's going on in the legal tech market, what's going on in e-discovery or CLM. So I still think there's, a path so you can be someone that legal tech publications go to, but it does kind of like, it is interesting if a legal tech company raises a couple million or 8 or 9 figures or something like that, but I still think they can get coverage.
Yeah, it's news. I mean, you've got to cover the news and that's news and you're going to cover it. And if a company chooses to bootstrap and doesn't need to do a raise like that, what they do need to do is find other ways to spin an interesting story about themselves and get the attention. If they want to get the attention of journalists, there are many other ways to do that and many other ways to make news.
Yeah,
I think it's
Sorry.
I was just going to say that was kind of my first thought when you said that is, yes, that is one piece of news, but releasing cool products, doing something new, opening up a new avenue for legal technology that in a new product category that maybe hasn't been released so far. There's many ways to innovate that isn't necessarily raising dollars.
And also, as we've seen with other entrants to the market that have raised a ton of cash, it doesn't mean anything. And so we've seen and others come in like Atrium or whatever and just not succeed, or slightly more established legal tech vendors raise and then burn through the cash, and I guess it sort of falls to us to look behind the raise, right? Like, so what Clio has done is genuinely impressive, but just because it's a raise doesn't necessarily mean it's a success. I think that's probably falls to us to kind of be a bit more intelligent in the way that we kind of interpret it over a longer period of time.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
we all saw the Atrium story last year, and we know what happened. I mean, there's exhibit A of why raising a lot of money doesn't mean you're successful.
Yeah, and I was just going to throw in on a non-legal front. We have the WeWork debacle and the Theranos debacle, and there were a lot of journalists, investors, and everybody else who, for a very long time, did not look behind the curtain and see how little there really was there. And so I think, Caroline, you're right. I mean, we as journalists, if I can throw myself into that category, I think it is important that when these things come out that we try to be objective and inquisitive and investigatory about what is or is not there.
Yeah, it's a tough curtain to look behind, though. I mean, they're not almost none of these are publicly traded companies, and it's really hard to get data about or that kind of insider information about what's really going on behind the curtain in a lot of these companies. And so to a certain extent, you have to kind of take their word for some of these representations. And also when there is a big investment, you have to assume that those investors have done some degree of due diligence and haven't just thrown their money at the wall to see if it'll stick, that they've got some idea that there's something working here or going on here.
True.
And I don't know about the rest of you, but I kind of celebrate when I hear news like that. I mean, something really good is happening in our collective business, and you think, great, you know. Sorry, Zach, I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, you're good. No, kind of building off that point, though, I think it's something that a lot of us on this call I know do is it helps to think like an investor and think about the business case that they're making as they're doing these raises. Like one of the first questions when I talk to a company after they do something like that is say, okay, so what is the business problem then you're trying to solve? Specifically, how are you going to be using this funds to expand, to do something new, to hire, what have you? And I know other people here are doing the exact same thing, and asking those questions kind of gets to the root of what their business proposition is, but also, is it a smart one? Or is it just saying, oh, we're going to expand scale and, you know, we have some ideas down the road, like nothing really set in stone, which I have gotten a few answers like in the past. So it's kind of on us to put on our own business hats and say, oh, does that actually make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much business are they really winning, right? So one of the things I want to talk about, if there's time later, is a couple of startups that have won enterprise contracts. I think that there's been a lot of like puff and, you know, oh, we've won this business, but actually it's just like one law firm signed one thing for one deal, and like actually, are they really generating? Are they profitable? Are they kind of, what's the expression? Are they actually sort of washing their face? Or, you know, that like it's quite tricky because of the time, if you know, amongst other things, to sometimes really interrogate. But I think that we're getting a bit smarter about about doing that.
Yeah. Just one other thing on the Clio before we move off of that. I also reported this week that Ryan Govro, the co-founder, is leaving, which I thought was I was kind of surprised by that news. But they said he's going to stay on the board, and he said he's going to remain very much involved with the company, just not on a day-to-day basis. He's said he wants to spend more time with his family. So a lot of respect for that decision. So good for him. What else? What was the other? I'm trying to remember what else we had on the list today. LawGeeks forming an ALSP to provide legal services in the U.S. You wanted, Nikki, was that you, I think?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, especially on the tail of other ALSP. VLSP is in Rochester, Volunteer Legal Services Project. I'm getting my SPs confused here. But alternative legal service providers. There was really a lot of news this week about those, and so this caught my eye. And it basically Legal Geeks threw itself in the ring, so to speak, with Utah's program to provide alternative legal services, become an alternative legal service provider. And I also had learned something I didn't realize about them, which was that, and I just recently, a couple months ago, wrote my ABA journal column on contract analytics tools that were AI based, and that they also have now transitioned to having people behind the scenes, lawyers, also providing some reviews. So they're moving from just a technology tool to sort of a service provider in that respect. And as I understand it from reading the article, the idea is that it's just from start to finish, rather than in terms of also being able to provide some legal advice through that particular program in Utah. And I just thought it was interesting to see how they're transitioning, and also that they're becoming part of that program, and especially in light of all the other news, some of which I think we had slated to talk about. One I don't think we do, which was on your blog today about Arizona and some things that they're doing there that you blogged about, Bob. But I think it's just interesting that I feel like that space is heating up a little bit now that those programs are in place. And I'd be interested in hearing what others thought about what's going to be happening with those programs in the near future too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll throw the story that I had in there as well because it's connected, which is basically that Utah extended its sandbox program for another 5 years, make it 7 years in total. They have 26, I think, in total that have signed up for the program at this point, and that's less than about 9 months in, which isn't too bad. They've actually gotten some bites, and they found it relevant and worthwhile enough to extend what they're doing. It was interesting in the beginning because when Utah and Arizona did this, I feel like a lot of people thought, all right, the dam's broken. Now we're going to get California. We're going to get New York. That hasn't really happened. But I think like what you're talking about, Nikki, and what the Utah extension in the past couple of weeks, Ontario also said that they're doing a similar regulatory sandbox program as well. It shows that the momentum hasn't fully stopped yet. There's still some trickle, there's still some breaks in that dam, and even if there's not the deluge yet, there's still more to come. I think so. I think you're going to see, especially when a few like Loggeys, if they're successful, then that's a use case for others saying, oh, this is something that actually is viable. And also if Utah is going to be doing this for 7 years, it's going to be around for a bit. It's worthwhile for me to invest resources now to actually get this done. So I think you're going to see more moving forward.
Well, plus Utah actually grandfathers the programs, I think, don't they? Doesn't it? So, I mean, if you don't risk having to close your business down if they end the sandbox, if you get it into the sandbox, then you're good to go. But I talked to Justice Timmer, who was the Arizona Supreme Court justice who chaired that task force that led to the recommendations, and she's going to be on my podcast that comes out Monday. She said definitely there's going to be others. I mean, she's been in conversations with other states, and she knows of things going on in other states, and that she has no question that others are going to follow suit with what they've done in Arizona.
I think it seems like really early days to be extending it, but I think that it's a really positive thing, because I think that one of the things when Utah when it sort of first came out that the sandbox was going to go ahead, one of the things I think would deter me was the short duration. I think now I think that will open up the field. It sends out a really positive signal, I think, to the market that it's not a short-term thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the thing that I had mentioned that Nikki alluded to before, I just wrote about it on my blog today, was they had approved, Steve, I'm seeing double vision of Steve or something.
Oh my goodness.
Me too, Steve, there's two of you.
There's two of you.
How did that happen? Oh my goodness.
We can't have enough.
They're
Steve.
multiplying.
That's okay.
Oh, damn, there's only one.
Arizona did. I mean, they're really just getting started in Arizona. They approved this last August, but they've just kind of set up this committee that approves the alternative business structures. It's been meeting since January. They've now approved 3 businesses as alternative business structures, so they're co-owned by lawyers and non-lawyers. None of them are exciting in terms of access to justice. They are, as I recall, at least two of them are basically CPA firms or tax firms that are going to be providing legal advice along with tax advice, which is, sounds like what the Big Four already do. And I think the other one was a kind of a financial planning or wealth management firm of some kind. So none of them are at this point focused on access to justice, but they do have a number of applications that have been made. Rocket Lawyer has submitted an application, and a number of other entities are trying to get in Arizona there. So that will change. I
still maintain, and I have all along, that for true access to justice, you need to fund LSC more. And that all of these, anything that's sort of a private entity sponsor type of thing isn't going to work because of capitalism. You need to fund LSC or refund it. It's basically defunded, so that the government, sure, there may be a lot of bureaucracy and they're not the most efficient at doing things, but when they set up those services to provide legal services to people who can't afford it, it actually gets the people who can't afford it, rather than ultimately ending up being something that is like the Big Four, taking advantage of this ability to practice law without a license because of the rules becoming more lenient. So I'm still waiting. I'm hoping that under Biden, maybe that will happen in terms of LSC, but that's a completely different issue for a different day.
I have to say, obviously, we're further ahead on the deregulation side, and it hasn't, in my experience, been focused on access to justice at all. It's about how you make how the corporates get cheaper advice, and how you build in tech. And I'm actually quite a fan, but it doesn't necessarily promote A to J in my experience. Certainly not in our experience.
Right. I don't know that I agree on the LSC. I mean, I certainly agree with funding the LSC more, but you're never going to get the degree of funding out of the federal government for the LSC that it would take to really tackle the access to justice crisis. And I don't think I don't think legal services organizations are set up to meet the full sort of array of legal issues that people face in the world. I mean, they tend to be pretty focused on specific, landlord tenant and family and immigration maybe, and things like that. But, that's not an answer. I mean, another thing they're doing in Arizona is this, what are they calling them? Legal paraprofessionals or something like that, which is sort of like the triple LTs that Washington had. And again, that didn't do very well in Washington State, as we know. That the Washington State ended that program, but they seem to be hopeful in Arizona that they've created less sort of bureaucracy around it, and tried to make it easier for people to get certified to do that. So essentially, you can deliver legal services directly of certain kinds without having to go through 3 years of law school and everything else. So it really lowers the barrier to entry to be able to provide legal services. And I think, and it also enables people who are in more geographically diverse parts of the state. Arizona is one of those states with a lot of legal deserts in it. So it enables people to be able to provide services in more geographically remote parts of the state. So I don't know, the verdict is obviously out, but I think it's moving in the right direction.
And I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see it fill that gap. So I hope I'm proven wrong.
And literal deserts in Arizona, not just legal ones.
They have those too. They do, and canyons, all sorts of cool stuff.
And Bob, you make a great point as usual about that, because when we talk about access to justice, sometimes we focus on the most marginalized people, as maybe we should, but there's also a huge class of people that don't have access to a lawyer, small businesses, entrepreneurs, people going through divorce or child custody issues, that they may have some money, but they can't afford to pay a lawyer, but they're not poverty stricken. And that's a huge market. And we were talking about Cleo earlier, but Jack Newton is very big on trying to figure out a way for lawyers who have not enough work to do to reach a group of people that have more legal problems than they know what to do with, but just can't afford a lawyer. So it's a broad problem all the way around.
Yeah, the low bono world is going to be the next big challenge to deal with too. Yeah.
Well, so Monday we all learned today kicks off the CLOC conference. Somehow none of us seem to know that. Maybe, well, I shouldn't say none of us. I'm speaking for myself.
Thank you, Stephen.
Until Steve emailed us this morning asking, how do you get a press registration for the CLOC conference? And we all said, what CLOC conference?
I was really impressed by, I don't know whether it was, sort of the collective thought process, but literally within 5 minutes after I sent that email, I had an email from Nicole at CLOC saying, "Oh, here's your press pass for the thing. Looking forward to having you there."
Yeah. Well, we told her to let you in, Steve. She wasn't so sure, but when she heard from us, But Victoria, you wrote a story this week that's I guess of some relevance. I don't know if you wrote. Did you write it or you picked a story this week? I actually.
My colleague, I believe Dan Clark at Corporate Counsel, he wrote like the breaking news when Mary O'Carroll stepped down from Google and also stepped down from being president of Clock. And last week, I think it was last week, or maybe it came out this Monday, I can't remember. But I wrote kind of like
all a blur.
Yes, it's all a blur. An analysis piece looking into like Mary O'Carroll leaving Google to join Ironclad, a legal tech company. That's a really big win, I think, for legal tech, and just kind of like a legal ops veteran leaving for a legal tech company, where I would assume she maybe could have went to like a big like general tech company or something like that. And just like Mary O'Carroll kind of, she's part of a trend that we've seen in the last few months of legal ops veterans leaving the corporate world and going into legal tech. And some of those people include Liberty Mutual, Bob Taylor and Jeff Marple, in-house legal ops leaders at that insurance company. Back in April, eDiscovery Tech and Services Provider Company Compliance hired the former managing counsel of BNY Mellon, and TIA's former chief operations officer and chief of staff, Brad Rogers, joined on it. And just kind of looking into like, and they've happened pretty closely, the announcements have come out pretty close to each other. And I was just wondering, like, why are we starting to see these types of hiring? And speaking to those legal tech company CEOs that have hired legal ops people, they said it's just kind of like they've reached a certain level where they need those insights from in-house at having a seat at the table, and not just necessarily reaching out for like a client call saying, hey, what's going on? But having them in their people's ear every day to figure out like, how should we be developing like our services, or what type of challenges should we be trying to make sure that our software helps solve? And just kind of like, as you're seeing legal tech companies mature, they have to bring those insights in-house. And Mary O'Carroll, I thought it was interesting. She said you're maybe also seeing more legal ops joining legal tech, because they're battle tested. They kind of see like how you improve operations in a company. And she was saying, oh, this is another like career opportunity for legal ops. I'm just kind of wondering, like, we may also see like more legal ops hiring coming into legal tech, especially with legal tech companies. They're raising a lot of money, and they may have extra cash. They can kind of say like, hey, you can come over here, and so I thought it was interesting, and something like I'm assuming see more of a trend of, and especially it goes against kind of like what we normally see with Zach and Reese, my editors. They mentioned about usually the big hires legal tech companies do, it's usually in sales or marketing, but now you're really seeing someone that is coming in to help with their sales, but more to provide more of like, this is what I'm seeing in the industry, and these are the experiences I had, and how you guys should be going after your clients, or at least building your software or your services this way.
Although I would be a bit cynical and say there is a sales aspect to this as well, because at a number of corporate legal departments or corporate organizations, the legal ops people are becoming key decision makers in purchasing technology and in talking about the systems to be used within the legal department and all of that. So for an Ironclad to have Mary there, that gives them a foot in the door to talk to a bigger foot into a bigger door, perhaps, to talk to people who are in a key decision-making role within their organization. So there might be a little sales and marketing part of it as well.
I definitely think there's an element of both. Like we've done stories recently too, just kind of talking to legal ops people, GCs, and the general perception is in-house is getting smarter about the tech products that they're buying. I think it was John Albright with Hub International told us basically, yeah, it's great if people have in-house on staff, but I want to know specifically what they're putting into the tool. What are those experiences? How is that actually being baked into what's given to me? Because otherwise you can have a talking head and that's great, but if the talking head's actual experience isn't reflected in the tool, then it doesn't mean anything. And I think a lot of particularly tech savvy legal ops people are starting to realize the same thing. So that's what gives me a little bit of, I guess, hope that somebody like Mary O'Carroll going in, yeah, it's in a sales role, but also I think Ironclad, frankly, would be dumb if they didn't leverage her for actual R&D and building out her experience into the tool as well.
Totally.
So I interviewed her the other day, and so this is just a specific to her rather than the legal ops moving to legal tech. But so what's interesting, and I'll be really curious to see how because we know how she's kind of helped develop the legal ops role. But so she said that she sees within the contract lifecycle management area. So her role, I'm sure there is a sales element, but she's called Chief Community Officer. I was like, what does that actually mean? And one of the elements of it is going to be quite genuinely to develop a community, which, as we know, that's what she's done so successfully with the legal ops side. And I said, well, will that be competing, or how does that fit in with legal ops? Is it going to be? And so it'd be really fascinating to see where she takes that, within the contract lifecycle management area, where I kind of think that she has a vision for developing it in the same way as she has done legal ops, right? Creating a real community and sort of getting, what she said is that within the contract space, you have to have all different voices, right? That's obviously, within legal ops, debatable as to whether they have brought in all the voices they need, but that's her ambition, to kind of bring in all the voices, create the dialogue, create the community. So I'm kind of really curious as to where she takes it.
Any other thoughts on that? Caroline, what's going on in the UK this week?
A lot.
Yeah, aren't you about
Anything
to go to
in
war
legal
with
tech?
Aren't you about to go to war with France or something? Like,
Yeah, I've been out on my boat all day. I've been going, get off my fish. It's been so busy. Like, one of the things I thought about, I was quite late sort of submitting my thoughts, but anyway, so it's just non-stop. Like, the news is just non-stop at the moment. I don't know, you guys probably find the same thing. So there were a couple of things. But this spoke to me about the maturity of the market. So there are a couple of stories this week about, there was Reed Smith announced an enterprise agreement with Brighter. And then Hogan Lovells announced an enterprise agreement with Legatix. And their press releases with respect are terrible, because you have to phone them up. And I mean, we should always phone them up anyway, but like, it's just really not clear as to what this means. Like, what stage are you at? What does this mean? Is this new? For me, it's really hard to work out what's actually going on. But when you speak to them, as I did in both cases, obviously, it's what it is that they've been both very different legal tech companies. Brighter, I'm not trying to draw parallels between Brighter and Legatix, but the parallels that the law firms have waited. They've done pilots, they've got experience of the tech, and then further down the line, they've then announced that they've signed an enterprise agreement. And I think that's kind of the right way to do it. I think that it's they've played around with the tech. They've tried to, they've actually got a couple of really good working, they've got some actual, they've been using it in anger, as it were. But it kind of spoke to maturity in the sense that this is a worthy announcement. So when I spoke to them both, and I spoke to Reed Smith couldn't talk about the actual client, that's not really their fault, but we talked about that they're doing work with Brighter on data protection. And then Legatix, again, they've actually been doing work, really proper work. It just spoke to me. I just kind of thought, well, this feels like a maturity, right? They've been, it was just interesting to me, rather than just going, hey, we've actually done anything with this startup, right? We've just, it was just more than that. So I kind of thought that the fact that they both came in the same week was quite interesting.
We haven't gotten to the rants and raves part, but you did touch on something that I would love to rant about, which is just how poorly written so many press releases are, and how much they failed to tell you at all what they're about.
Yeah, I was like,
yes, we should always be calling people to follow up anyway, but it would be nice to know what you're calling about,
Exactly, work it out. So we could do some serious training, like, what is the actual point? Why are you telling us what you're telling us? What has changed? What is new? What is new? and the best thing I was ever told, if anyone listening in ever writes a press release, imagine you're telling your friend what the story, like, and just write it like that, like that you're telling your friend this is the story. And yeah, anyway, yeah, I could rant all day. Go on mute.
I always get a kick out of it every time I quote a press release in one of my posts. And then I ran everything through Grammarly and another editor in it. So I always rewrites the press release, and I'm thinking, like, don't you guys like have these kind of tools? I mean,
yeah. Well, the grammar is one thing, and then like just the fact that they're like mud. I mean, you just can like I'll read them over several times and say, I just don't know what's happened. What? Even the headline is like doesn't help. So anyway,
and of course, some of the time nothing has happened, which is
well, a good, fair point, a very fair point.
And that's what we're trying to.
I don't know. Go ahead. I was just going to say this is giving me flashbacks to legal writing class, in law school. Like, tell the story rather than get caught up in all the legalese and mumbo jumbo. And you guys are basically saying the same thing. So I think it's just good writing, right?
And we've said this before, you don't want to get caught out writing something that's not a story, right? So you want to make sure that it's not path that's new. And actually both of these it's really cool. They've actually really progressed, and they're really interesting stories, but it's just, yeah, it's just trying to interpret and make sure that it's not just some, opportunity to just put out something that's not really a story.
And I don't mean to paint a broad brush either, but I think what often happens, especially with some of these, well, I think what often happens is they end up they're not writing for reporters necessarily. They're writing these press releases for their executives or their investors or somebody else, and maybe for a committee of executives who are all going to have to approve it and sign off on it. And by the time it gets through all that, ain't much news left.
Yeah. Joe had an interesting, or John, sorry. I don't know if you saw the question in the comments. Do you like the story narrative for press releases or outline form? I thought that was an interesting question. What do you guys think?
What does that mean exactly?
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, like
exactly.
whether it basically reads like a version of a journalistic story that we then pick apart and recreate, or whether here's a series of bullet points and we then create our own story. Personally, I prefer the bullet points to a point, but then with quotes that are easily pullable into a story. So you don't necessarily need to write a narrative, but if the bullet points are beefed up with, here's something you can just block, pull, and drop in, that would be ideal.
I love it when you've got somebody who perhaps has been a journalist who writes it the way that we would write it, and you read it and you go, and I'm going to swear now, I'm not going to swear. You're like, that I can just use that. That's effing amazing. And my one tip would be that is not going, oh, we are amazing. That's going, the client, this is the problem that we solve, right? There's not going, oh, this company is, they're so amazing and we love them. It's like, I'm never going to include that. It's like, this is the problem that they solve. This is really this. If you think about what your audience wants, what do the people want to read about? How is it useful? What problem is it solved? Like, only include interesting, useful stuff that if you were the end user, like if you were the client, you go, oh, I think I might need that, like rather than, they're amazing, I love them, I particularly love John, like no offense. There's no, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's got to be useful. It's got to be that for me is the only stuff I would ever include. I don't know if everybody else, I'm ranting.
I generally prefer not a press release at all. I mean, I'd prefer to just get an email from somebody saying, "Dear Bob, here's this news we're announcing. Here's what the news is. Here's why we think it's significant. Would you like to speak to somebody in our organization or something about it? Here are some good people to talk to."
I say that to people all the time. I don't need a press release, but if you do have a press release, that's
yeah.
Don't you think that you want, like Caroline said, though, because everyone's in a rush and sometimes you just want to get the news out, some useful chunks of text to cut and paste to throw in there and build a story around, or no?
I do.
It depends how desperately busy I am.
Well, I like to, and I like to just like background information is helpful, because then you don't have to go like look up, how this company may describe itself or how it describes the product. That saves a lot of time for me because, I don't want to go looking around and internet to see what, widget code does, when somebody's already said it.
Yeah,
This may just be a problem with
BIOS
my
are good.
aging brain, but sometimes I even read those things and I still don't know what the company does after they.
Fair
Joe, I'm
point.
sorry.
What were you saying, Joe? You were like,
Oh no, I was completely agreeing with Steve. Those bios of the company are always useful for pulling the couple of lines about what they want to describe themselves as. Because I can describe them based on what I know about them, but that may not be what they want to be described as. And I am willing to take their lead.
you are?
Well, sometimes there's some companies that are like, they want you to think they're this. They are
I
not.
think that today's episode, somehow you should mention when you summarize it, Bob, if you do, that it's like a how-to from journalists to get your story out there, right? Like, I think there's
We could do a
such
whole
useful
episode on that.
information in here.
I think we did it once at some conference,
We
but I
did.
actually think all conferences should have that panel.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, this is how you try to get our attention.
Yeah. We did it at ILTA
Yeah.
1 year, or maybe a couple times at ILTA, which could be a cue for Joe to talk about ILTA.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, good segue, Bob. Good segue.
Yeah, that.
Are we moving into the rant phase? Is that what we're doing now?
I guess. But look, I'm not necessarily ranting. And I actually think this also is related to that clock revelation we all had. It seems as though the press is getting weirdly lost in some of these conferences. We didn't necessarily know clock was happening. With ILTA, we all, obviously it had been pitched to us all that it was going to be this hybrid model. We've talked on this show about how a number of us had already started talking to people about things to do there. And then this week, we all started getting the perfunctory email from ILTA saying, as press members, you can watch online if you want, which was not at all kind of how it was sold as a concept. And ultimately, I get it.
Except Caroline and me, I think. Did anybody else get, I don't know if anybody else got the other one?
Oh, really?
So
They sent another one?
Oh, I couldn't unmute.
some
Are
are-
we going to be by the pool?
Oh,
Bob? We're gonna
oh,
be
wait,
by
wait,
the
wait.
pool.
Mine was, we would like to have you come to Las Vegas.
Oh,
Yeah, there's
really?
upper
Oh,
class
so
and
I
lower
thought-
class
oh,
press.
Oh, I thought when you made that when you responded to our internal group email with, "Oh, they're putting me up in a penthouse," I assumed you were joking.
Well,
Oh,
I was
so
joking about the penthouse.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, they suck.
The limo is definitely not part of it. No,
yeah, no,
I'm paying for my own. Yeah.
No,
So-
it's completely. Well, the thing is, I get it on the grounds that they can't necessarily give out passes to everything, because even though Vegas has more or less said they're going to be open to 100% capacity by June, they are not there now, and so you can't necessarily give out tickets that you can't honor if those restrictions don't get lifted. But everyone expects they're going to get lifted, and then they'll do that. That said, it's something of a shambles of how they're trying to go about doing it. Knowing this situation, they absolutely are doing it in a very kind of haphazard and screwed up way. I mean, I'm very sympathetic. I wrote them, was like, oh no, I mean, I get it. By June, you're going to have the all clear, and then you'll probably hand all these out. And I certainly don't mind waiting until then. And if they don't, we'll do it just the same way we do Legal Tech New York, and everybody's just going to get a room, and we're not going to ever go to the conference because it's, basically in the way and an excuse for us all to meet in suites. But it would be nice if they could avoid that fate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you, Joe. I mean, I was also # not invited, which, but and I understand it. I mean, the hotel put restrictions on how many people can be there, and they have to elect between paying customers and those of us that get passes complimentary. But it just any way you shake it, it kind of left a bad taste in those of us that didn't get an invite. I mean, that's just human nature, and it could have been, I think, thought through and maybe said from the beginning. Well, right now we can't bring everybody. We hope to be able to bring everybody. Keep your powder dry.
Yeah.
But instead, it was sort of held out as, hey, we're open and going to see all you great people in Vegas and make your plans.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a situation. It is an unprecedented situation, and I understand the pressures they're under. It seems as though it's being operated in less than ideal fashion. But well, I'm sure we'll all forget about this by June.
The only thing I'd say is that for everyone remembers the last CEO when there was a big press debacle, because do you remember that? And I wrote.
I
Nikki
remember
remembers it well.
I wrote a very derogatory piece on the plane, calling him something like an effing arsehole or something, and I don't know. Anyway, so and that was different, right? So that was a very sinister attack on the press, and I was absolutely disgusted. I think the only thing I'd say about Joy and Dawn and that lot, I think that we know that they understand the value of the press. I feel that they have, they do really get the value. They get that people are there to speak to the press, and I kind of feel like there's no kind of, unlike that previous thing, there's no sinister, they're just, I think it's really difficult, and it's easy for me to say, but I just feel like I don't know, it's very, but then having said that, that's perhaps an important point to make, which is that in terms of the press being there, that is one of the reasons why, without being too, blowing smoke up, whatever, but, people do go there to get publicity, right? So actually the press are a really important part of the conference, and you need good press representation there, because as we know, we've got all of them, the media, the PR reps who are constantly trying to, get their clients in front of us. And so we are, the press form a big part of the fabric, right? So you need good press representation.
I think as I think I talked about on our Clubhouse show earlier in the week, to me it kind of points out some of the inherent risks with hybrid conferences. People are everybody's kind of going around saying, oh, we're going to have hybrid and we'll have the best of both worlds, but you don't necessarily end up, and maybe this is unique and won't happen again, but I tend to think, you with the vendors and with attendees and different price points and different ways of participating and all kinds of cost issues, I think hybrid conferences, are going to be harder than people think to pull off successfully.
Do you know what's so interesting? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to kind of underscore what you said, Caroline, because in a part, that's part of what makes this sort of stand out as an incident, is just because ILTA did have a history of having really problematic relations with the press at various points. Nikki can tell you her story, but she had issues with them as well. And the current administration, whatever you want to call it, the folks who are the head of that organization now have made a diligent and largely successful effort to counter that and to kind of form, more open and transparent relationships with the press and keep the press informed of things going on there, even to the point where there's been bad news, they've called a press conference and, been right up front about it. So there's I'm sure they were just between a rock and a hard place here. And I'm not sure there was a right way to handle this. I don't know that they could have said, open the door to all press and probably didn't want to close the door to all press. And, they probably had to find some middle ground. At the same time, I was saying earlier, I don't think of the ILTA's conferences that I've gone to where the press has actually been there, and at physical conferences, not like they're huge numbers. We don't get, it's not the Democratic Convention or something. We're not getting huge numbers of reporters there. I mean, I feel like maybe 10 or something might be a fair number of how many reporters have been there in the past. So I don't know.
Well, you think if nothing else, they would have at least been aware of this webcast and been like, I wonder if they all talk to each other. Maybe we should just invite them all in person just to be on the safe side here. That would have been the smart move, in my opinion.
Yeah. I wonder if it might have occurred to them that this could be a topic on this round table.
And also, can we just say that Bob, can you just explain how you're going to be by the pool with your GoPro, please?
Yeah.
Well, Molly McDonough suggested we do pool coverage, which people listening to this will probably know is, often like here in Massachusetts, we have pool coverage of the courts. We'll have one camera in the courtroom, and all the other networks and TV newspapers get to use that footage from that camera. So I'm going to do the pool coverage. I'm going to get a GoPro and I'm going to go sit by the pool. And that'll be our pool coverage. No, in fact, the irony is that some of the people who are watching it virtually will be able to cover parts of it better than those of us who are there physically. Certainly the seminars will get, you can do, it's easier to cover a seminar online, I think, than while you're sitting there live.
I think that's true, but I think that's absolutely true, but it's also kind of strikes at one of the problems, right? Which is that the interesting stuff that we mostly write about is not the warmed over CLEs that happen, right? We don't talk a lot about those seminars for a reason, because they don't actually, they're for IT people at these firms, and that's what they get out of them. We don't get much. What we get a lot out of is walking the exhibit floor, having meetings with people, and all of that sort of stuff is stuff that is impossible to do virtually and can really only be done physically, which is why this is such a bizarre decision, but alas.
Yeah, and kind of to that point, I mean, actually, that's why I think this particular conference is the one that you would want journalists at, because the big story here is how the heck are they putting on this legal technology conference, the very first one in person in a year and a half? That is the story. And I think, especially if you're ILTA, and you plan on doing it successfully, I would think you would want that story told in as many outlets as possible.
Maybe too much pressure on those of us who are going.
Yeah.
Zach,
I
are
have
you
missed
sending anybody? Do you know? Are you?
Yeah, I'm at least going, and we're figuring out the rest. I think we got 2 in person at ALM.
Just to your point, Joe, about being in person. So we've been in lockdown. I went for my first trip to London, first time on a train in a year, went for a corporate lunch. And there was a few of us, and I'm not kidding you, within the first 2 minutes, I got more interesting information than I had done in the last 6 months. We were just sat there and it all was coming out and we were just chatting. And it was just, I was like, oh, I've missed this so much. And it was just that I like the virtual now, but it's just incredible the difference it makes being just sat around a table. I just was like, wow, this is just like it should be. It was just incredible.
I mean, look, I'm sure if they don't come around on this subject, it really doesn't matter. I mean, I will just have 30 vendors be walking over to the hotel bar in 20-minute increments all day. It all gets done. It just makes them look bad, which I am trying not to make them do. But that's now ultimately in their hands.
So are you going, Joe?
Yeah, I mean,
you're gonna go. Yeah.
I mean, I've already got vendors who've said, "Oh, are you gonna go? Let's meet." And not that we scheduled times, but I've got people inviting me to things let's go do this day and stuff. I'm like, all right, so yeah, I'll go.
And actually, they do not want to go the way of New York. I don't think.
I would hope not.
No
offense, earmuffs, ALM.
No, with respect, I know it's your no disrespect, but that and there's lots of reasons why it's like that. Where ILTA doesn't have to be, obviously, but so yeah, I think that if they can make it inclusive, that would be a great thing.
Oh, so it sounds like Steve, you and I will be at the bar having meetings coming in. Yeah, we could do the alternative. The alternative conference.
Right.
We'll have a way more fun conference. Yeah.
Of course, it's Vegas, so people might be wondering what the heck's going on in that bar with people coming and going. You might get arrested, but hey.
Wouldn't be their first time. So
I was going to say Vegas probably would not think that was weird, but okay.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get to all the stories. I think there's a couple more we didn't get to, but we are out of time. And so that's it for today. Thanks to everybody for attending and watching. And we will be back next week and rant more about conferences then.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Have a good weekend.